Well, it's been a hot minute since I ever pressed record, and stream for that matter. Figured I kind of wanted to give like a life update or something like that. Thought it might be slightly therapeutic. But yeah, I'm guessing at least the people who are left over who will probably see this video kind of wonder where I've been, what's been going on, and I figured I kind of want to cover that stuff. So basically, when it comes down to streaming or any form of content creation, I sort of just kind of lost the passion. It's like the second I went past like 1,000 subscribers, well, even then before that, there were points of time where, I just kind of dipped because it started feeling more like a chore than anything, especially since there's no real diversity in my content. It just had to do with pressing stream and just going through level requests continuously. And then it got to the point it's like, I want to do some like level completions and all that. And I thought that might help the situation. It did for a little bit, but eventually it kind of got to the point where it's like, I don't necessarily know if this is my calling. And motivation just sort of dropped entirely. And so that's kind of what happened with streaming. And basically proceeding after that, I'm pretty sure I stopped streaming entirely. What's this, maybe senior? I think it might have been junior year of high school. So I went on senior year, finished off high school. I'm currently in college now. I graduated the year of 2024. And pretty much as I start to make this transition into college, it's like giving a little context behind it. I was not a good student in high school. I simply wasn't. Except like when I entered into high school, I sort of started to find this passion more so towards education. Found the process of learning to be very intriguing to me. Now, it wasn't like it was the center of my life at that point. It wasn't. I still got pretty dog shit grades, if I do say so myself, except I am going to give myself credit where credit is due. I got better. I got a lot better. Because, like, I went from sophomore year being a mostly C's student. Well, okay, let's go to like eighth and ninth grade. There were classes where I would just simply fail. And then transitioning into high school and starting to find my motive, I started to see a slight incline from like C's, C's maybe a B, and then junior year mostly B's, and then senior year I'd get some A's, but also just B's. And then we make that fun transition into college, which most people find very daunting. Well, okay, maybe not most, but from what I've heard, people do find it fairly daunting to go into college because it's different. It's a different environment. You'll have to excuse my face cam tweaking out. My laptop's been having issues here and there, but it's whatever. So for me though, it's like it was originally very stressful going into college because it's like, dang, going from high school into college, it's very different. It is very, very different, and it's also very financially straining. But I choose to go to community college first, in which I'm still in community college right now. And I make that transition, and pretty much very first semester, it's like something genuinely clicked. Like, it's kind of whack going from this absolute garbage student into someone who just casually left that semester with all A's. It's like I didn't take that many classes though, and a lot of that has to do with just finances. I don't want to pull out any student loans whatsoever until I absolutely need to, in which I'm still doing that. So it's like basically getting back on topic. It's like I took macroeconomics. I took intro to psychology, and I took intro to sociology. I was basically just taking classes just to kind of find what I want, in which I already had the idea that I wanted to do something business related. But then I take intro to psych, and wow, that had to be the most interesting class I've ever taken in my life. And that's when I kind of knew I'm very interested in this subject and I want to do something related to the subject as my career. Now, I was still kind of a social media goer, and so I had Instagram. That's basically it. I guess you can technically call Discord social media since it is. I use it for just messaging friends. But pretty much it's like you'll look at society and they're completely shitting on what you want to do, which for me was psychology. And it's like someone who gets their doctorate in psychology or something like that. It's like, oh wow, there's just the caption saying, bro wasted his entire educational life to go get paid like, I don't know, 60 grand a year and forever be in debt. It's like that's something that very I it made me deviate from the idea of going into psychology. And so I became an accounting major. Mm, very fun. I first took accounting in senior year of high school. I did very, very good at it because it was very, very easy. And it came to me naturally. I think that's one of the reasons it was very easy. But high school accounting is also like basic arithmetic. Can you add and subtract? That's basically it. But then later on, accounting becomes very wordy. It's a lot of word problems, which apparently a lot of people struggle with. And so I found it natural, became an accounting major, and continued on with that. And going on to the next semester, um, well, okay, semester after first semester, actually, I didn't become an accounting major just yet. I took developmental psychology, abnormal psychology, and principles one of accounting. And that's when I started to make that decision and got influenced by social media, which is stupid, by the way. And pretty much after that semester, in which I did really good in all courses, especially accounting and especially abnormal psych, I did decent in developmental psych. I think I left that with like a B plus, which is pretty good. But then you go on to the next semester, and before that semester started, I decided I'm gonna just major in accounting. Think a little, practically. And like I obviously have a life I need to support, and accounting it can do that. It will also kind of take your life as well. There's this thing known as busy season in the accounting field, and you'll work like 80 plus hours every single week for months. And I heard about that. I was like, wow, I don't know if I necessarily want to do this anymore. But I continued on. I continued with grit and discipline in that semester. I studied a ton. I dedicated a lot of my time to just studying. I'd go to a library and just sit down and study basically because I'm also very interested in the learning process and how I can make it more efficient for myself and how I can be as effective with my time as much as possible. In which I just continued on. It's really just about grind. And yeah, that led to sort of a dip in mental health. That's for sure. Because I was doing so much studying studying, and then of course I have work, I have my job, and I wasn't really taking care of myself. I wasn't really speaking with friends or doing much outside of studying. I mean, I'd talk to them over Discord, but I wasn't spending a lot of time with them. And after that semester, I left with very, very good grades. I took payroll accounting, principles 2 of accounting, and I took, what was it? I forgot what it's called, but it has to do with a lot of different like applications and programs and applying them to the business world, such as like sheets and all that. Hella boring. Hella boring. I'm just gonna say that. For me, it was very boring. I mean, I suppose it isn't boring for everyone, but me personally, I just knew it wasn't my thing, in which I just decided, after that semester, left with terrific grades, as I mentioned, but I got bored as hell. I was so egregiously burnt out that it's like, why am I even doing this? Is this really something I want to go into? In which I said, nah, hell nah, I'm good. And then I swapped my major to psychology. And now going into, what was this? Fall semester. Um, Hang on. Fall semester was semester. That was okay. Fall semester was the accounting semester, which is start of second year, and I just finished with spring semester, in which is when I swapped to a psychology major. And this is also when I got into the idea of pre-med, in which I am very passionate about. I find the sciences to be extraordinarily interesting to me, and that on top of psychology. So I started doing my research, and I found this career called psychiatry, which is basically being a psychologist who can prescribe medicine and has a medical background, in which I want to be as holistic in my approach with my practice as much as possible. I want it to be natural and I want it to be effective. And so I decided I'll go into medicine. And pretty much with that idea in mind, I decided I'm going to try a semester of just science classes, right? And the semester that ended not that long ago, spring semester, I took like an entry level physics class. I took general biology 1 and I took composition 1. And thing is, I did have interest in all of these classes. Physics kind of dropped a little bit for me. I think a lot of that was just my experience with the class itself and the fact that this is also a time where I couldn't get a hold of my medication, in which I'll get into that a little bit later. But pretty much, it's like that semester, it got kind of trashy at a point because I was finding very hard time to remain motivated. I guess I may as well go into the medication thing right now because it has a whole lot to do with how this semester went. I do have some pretty severe ADHD. I like to shorten it to ADD since I predominantly have the attentive variant of ADHD. And because of how bad it is, and I've been still experiencing this, um, it sort of led to this relapse into this ADD state. And without my medication, it makes it so much worse. Like that's the reason the relapse happened in the first place. It's because with ADD, your brain, your neurology functions differently from your neurotypical individual. In which, from my experience, it sucks. It sucks the actual life out of you because it's this disalignment or misalignment from what you genuinely want to be and what you want to do and what your brain wants and what your brain wants to do. In which the brain, it's a very powerful object. It's one of the most complex objects there is on this planet, and pretty much it is very controlling. Like, this is why the near, like, some people just have a hard time understanding people who are disordered because that is not their experience. A lot of people tend to be a subjectivist in or to some degree because they haven't experienced it. They function normally without medication. They function just fine. They can go to their day-to-day life. But a lot of people, I feel like, tend to forget that there is always a mental aspect to this. It may be physically possible for someone to take action and do something, but there's that psychological part. There's the mental part of it. Your brain is an organ, and it is ultimately what controls your body. And when it gets out of whack, when the neurochemistry starts to lead to sort of entropy or disorder, things can go downhill very quick. It's like your own brain is gaslighting you into things you don't want to believe. And so I had to struggle with that throughout the semester. I did dip into it, got very bad to the point where I dipped into alcohol, smoking, other drugs, in which I was very adamant about never doing. But again, it's one of those things where your brain feels like you're being pushed into this corner that you don't want to be pushed into. And it can be very strong. It's like this very attractive force that you're just going towards, except you know it's not good for you, but it's like you fall into that pit anyways. And it's like it's never fun. And so that had a heavy impact on the semester because I was like, why aren't I doing this? Why am I being unproductive? But meanwhile, my brain just kind of like has me chained down to like the bed or something, just kind of being a bit of a sluggard. And pretty much it's like that caused my grades to drop. And I know I could have done so much better. I know I have the potential to do so much better in any of those classes. And so it's like I proved it to myself the accounting semester, in which I did have my medication on a consistent basis. This entire semester, I basically went without it. I had like a few of my pills in which, put a little more context, I take Adderall. I take like a 20 milligram extended release. And I also have these boosters that are like 5 milligrams if I ever need it. In which when I first started to, weed off the medication a bit because I just had very few pills and I wanted to save them. It's like I was functioning fine for like maybe a couple weeks. But it very quickly led to the downfall in that relapse. And also the start of the semester was just kind of garbage anyways. Like, you really need to focus on like how you start off with the classes. You need to make sure you're looking into how the class works and how the teacher approaches teaching and, assignments and all that. So that's always very important to do first thing right off the bat. But I got sort of, I don't know, I want to say discombobulated because that's a funny word at first because I still kind of suck with that, and which I do know I need to get better at that. In future semesters, I'm gonna just push myself to do that. Now, of course, it goes back to the medication, but yeah, it's like you really need to make sure you get a good start the very first couple days. Make sure you get everything planned, get a solid schedule, in which that's something I definitely have difficulties with. But going on the semester, it's like I low-key almost failed physics. Like, it wasn't necessarily due to its difficulty, it was just due to my lacking effort that I just couldn't really put into it. I didn't have motivation, and I just had no activation energy to use. on that subject. And so it's like I clutched up. I did fairly decent on the final. I didn't do great by any means, but I did enough. I did enough to be able to pass with like a C, in which all my grades ended up being a C, even for Comp 1, which I feel like this is some complete boohickey, I will say, because Canvas ended up getting hacked, and so I couldn't submit my final essay. And then got the email for the extension, in which he was very strict in that, or like direct on the fact that he didn't want to extend it anymore than he had to, at least. And so I got that extension. Originally, it was due at like 11:59 p.m. that day. And then the extension email was sent, and it said it was due at 2 p.m. that day. I had work in the morning until 2 p.m. So I ultimately just could not get it in. So it's like that dropped my grade from like, I think it was an A minus down to a C. It's nasty shit, bro. But yeah, I'm hoping to like do better these next upcoming semesters. I cannot be having C's. I just can't. I'm going into pre-med, in which GPA is very important. But yeah, so that's what my educational life is looking like right now. And see what else. I did also dip into a bit of religion as well. We could go over that. This started, I think, a little bit before. No, I think this was maybe during first semester of college. So when my friend introduced me to Christianity, and basically I became very passionate about it, to say the least. Because when you have this God applied to your life, that's like omnipresent, omnipotent, and what is it, omnisentient. It's like things sort of change, and the fact that there's the idea of the afterlife, something after you die, right? Sounds awesome. And I start reading into it, into the Bible, which there's like 66 different books you can read from. And it just starts to stick with me, especially since I grew closer with my grandma, who is pretty devoted to her Christianity, and then closer to my friend Jackson, who is extremely devoted to his Christianity, and which I have respect for that. But it's like as going on, I became very passionate about it, and I got into evangelism and also apologetics. And this is going to skip quite a bit of time because there's a lot I could go over about my Christianity. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to skip over a chunk of that since it doesn't seem as relevant now as it did in the past. And basically, I dove into, as I mentioned, evangelism and apologetics. Now I'm going to put emphasis on apologetics because that's something I had a genuine passion on. Because I try to function my philosophical ideas or stem the functionality of my philosophical ideas from just like a very logistical standpoint, in which I go into apologetics and it's like it stands for a bit, but me, I'm very direct with my my belief in being open-minded, being a free thinker. And so with that comes both sides of the coin, right? I have to look into Christianity and why it should be supported, and I have to look against Christianity and why it seems like incredible or less credible, I should say. In which I do that, and I start to have a whole load of doubts, especially since I look into it myself from my own view. I also try to get views of others, like other atheists, especially on YouTube. I have a bunch of great ideas there. And of course, I look into apologists. And pretty much that's when things started to fall apart for me. And I was Christian for roughly 2 years, and I was very devoted to it. I saw just God as basically everything in my life. And watching it crumble was very difficult for me. And I know that there will be these like assumptions like, oh, I just never had enough faith, or I was never Christian in the first place, or that I'm just being rebellious, in which I just have to call BS on that, like I do. I know my experience, and for people to just psychoanalyze me, thinking they know what my intentions are and that I don't, is very heavy to put on someone. And it will not bring someone closer to religion, it will toss them away. In which, when I made my initial approach for deconstructing my faith, it's like I did it, even though I had those like feelings and emotions, I did my best to just set them aside and just take these objective, or well, I guess subjective in a sense, philosophical ideas that go for and against God. Because I'm not gonna discredit God based off of my experience with their community, even though that I will admit it leads to a more individual, subjective reasoning as to why I left. And so it had its impact, is what I'm saying. But I just try and keep things nice and clear. Look at the ideas, look at these different viewpoints about God, and look into it yourself as well. And which is exactly what I did. I went through the Bible and the idea of this benevolent, all knowing, all powerful, omnipresent God just started to kind of crumble beneath my feet. In which, because it was my lifestyle, it was the literal center of my lifestyle and how I lived a day to day life. You can imagine how that goes. It's not fun. It's not like I wanted to stray into disbelief, but I kind of had to if I was going to stay fairly true to my own ideologies of being open minded, being a free thinker. And so I delve into it more, the idea or the application of God's character unto the world we currently live in. It just doesn't make any sense. And also, sort of, I don't know, I want to use the word pretentious in this, and I'm sorry if this like offends anyone. Sort of like the idea that, I don't know, you go through the Bible and this God, as I mentioned, all knowing, all loving, and just present through and through. Um, you read up on one what this God's character is like in the Bible, and it doesn't exactly align entirely with those characteristics that are presented. And which I don't have a bunch of verses like just in my mind ready to just open fire, but I know what I read, I know what I saw, and it just started to deconstruct my faith entirely. And so now I do currently identify as more so atheist. I wouldn't say full atheist because I feel like everyone's agnostic to some degree. That might be an overgeneralization. I know that there are people who are very, very passionate about their atheism, and which, yeah, I suppose it'd be considered just pure atheists. But me, I can't say there isn't a God. I can't say there is. But all I can say is from my own experience, it just doesn't seem coherent to me. Especially since I do still pray every once in a while, asking for God to reveal himself if he's still there. And I constantly get just nothing back. So it's like I'm still actively knocking on that door, but it's like the door's not being opened whatsoever. So it's like, I don't know. I just don't see myself becoming Christian again. And if you are religious, I don't have the intent to make you have any real doubts. Ultimately, I just see it as like if you can be happy with it, then that's fine, as long as you're not being harmful in any way. So it's like we all have our own ideas, we all have our own constructed realities based on how we are living and what experiences we have, our subjective experiences that construct this sort of schematic for us to thrive on. And yeah, that was my experience with religion. Once I had to announce to my grandma that I was, not Christian anymore, she was very, very disappointed, in which that did hurt a little bit. But it's like, what can you do? I mean, of course, she's going to be disappointed because her view is seen as this objective truth that cannot be deviated from or disproven, question mark. But I obviously have other thoughts about that. And my friend Jackson, still a great guy. It's like he handled it a lot better. Me and him, we're still friends. Just our worldviews differ. And I feel like that can go for everyone, even Christians. There's so many different denominations, doctrines within Christianity that the united part of Christianity just seems to fall short. I can see my camera's starting to tweak out a little bit, so you have to excuse that. I hope the mic is working all right, though. Yeah, now I'm gonna go on to kind of what I expect for my future. And since I'm going into pre-med, and I feel like that's fairly set for the time being, I do plan to go into medical school and get what's called a doctorate in osteopathic medicine or doctorate in osteopathy, shortened to DO, and go into the field of psychiatry. And that is a total of 12 years of schooling. So it's quite the journey, say the least. Um Not much I can really do about that. And I definitely feel willing to do it, even though I know that the load of work is going to be very arduous. But like I said, I'm fairly passionate about sciences, so I don't have too much concern about that. My only concern being my ADD. If I get to the point where I can't have or take hold of my medication and I can't obtain it, that's obviously going to have its effects on my grades and performance and whatnot. But I also want to go over like what I'm gonna do with this channel because obviously it's like I don't have to do something with it, but right now it's like I feel like I have to say something about the future. I just feel obligated to, so it's like I really don't know. I just kind of want to post this video, give y'all an update, but it's like I don't really have that passion for like streaming or recording content anymore. At least when it comes to like video games, which is what my channel is basically about, gaming, in which I'm actually not as much of a gamer anymore. I desensitized that first semester of college. I went on like a 5 month video game fasting, and my brain, the dopamine rushes just never happened. So it's like I'm not exactly the most hooked. In fact, I'm fairly I'm basically deviating away from video games and taking up different things. I mean, I have my trumpet playing, in which I'm kind of like a comeback trumpet player now since I had to go on Accutane for a bit. I do speed cube a little bit, and I mostly just like to go spend time outside and like go to the mall, go to a park, walk around, enjoy nature, do fishing, something like that. I'll still play the occasional video game like Repo. That's one I want to play with my friends at some point. That'd be really fun. But yeah, just like because that isn't such a strong part of my life, it's like I don't know what else I'd really do with this channel, considering it was all about a block jumping game, playing Geometry Dash for hours on end. But yeah, with all that being said, though, I hope y'all are doing great, obviously, and I wish the best for whatever you have planned for your future. And maybe I'll make another update video like this again at some point. Who knows? But yeah, then I'm going to end the recording. Y'all have a great rest of your day and take care.